The one and only Steve Cram.
One of the world's most dominant middle distance runners of all time, Steve Cram.
So a former athlete, Steve Cram, 1500 metres, a long time ago, and these days commentate on athletics for the BBC.
Northeast middle distance running legend, Steve Cram.
And BBC Sport commentator for athletics.
He's going to make it 2 gold medals! Beautiful! The place he wants!
World champion and Olympic silver medalist runner.
And the world champion, the European champion, the Commonwealth champion, the world record holder at 1500 metres, majestically comes striding away. This time, is it to crack the world record? Yes, it is. 3:46.3. Gonzalez. Steve Cram with his first major international 800 metres title.
You get to the top of the mountain and there's only one way to go after that, theoretically. And I got a really bad injury. It was touch and go as to whether I was actually going to compete because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do myself justice.
Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Brit Show with me, Ethan. Coming up on today's show, my interview with world champion and Olympic silver medalist runner and BBC Sport commentator for athletics, Steve Cram. So let's get straight into my interview with the lovely Steve Cram. Welcome on the show, a man who broke 3 world records within a 19 days period. The 1984 1,500 meters Olympic silver medalist and the 1983 1,500 meter world champion, known as one of the best middle distance runners of the 1980s, and now he's the BBC Sports main commentator for athletics. It's the one and only Steve Cram.
Hello, thanks for that. Enthusiastic welcome.
How are you doing today?
Not bad, yeah, just easing into the new year. Not kind of quite ready for everything yet, but I'm sure it'll all happen pretty quickly. So, but yeah, just trying to get back into routine.
Yeah, so let's go. So if people don't know who you are, explain to them what you do and who you are.
Oh wow, okay, well, yeah, I suppose anyone over a certain age might not, or under a certain age. Well, as you mentioned, I had a fairly successful athletics career back in the day, which was at a time when I think athletics was probably at its height in terms of popularity and you know, viewing and sponsors and all the rest of it. So it was a great time to be an athlete in the 80s and 90s. And then, yeah, retired in kind of 94. And then I've done lots and lots of different things, but the kind of main thread through not long after that, a couple of years after I'd retired, was I started commentating, initially with Eurosport and then joined the BBC after 2-3 years. So I've been at the BBC, oh gosh, how long now? 20 something years, 23 years, 24 years.
Wow.
Yes, I know exactly, yeah. So I've been talking about athletics a lot longer than I actually did it. But yeah, I do lots of other things as well. We have an events company where we organize running and other events, triathlons and things. And yeah, a whole bunch of stuff which it would take way too long to sit and explain about.
So let's get right back to the start. So what were you like as a kid?
I certainly was. What was I like as a kid? God, you have to ask other people that, don't you? I don't know. I think I was actually probably more shy than I probably became. Although I wouldn't call myself a shy person, or not even as a kid. But certainly in very early on. But sport was always a big thing. So whenever I had the chance to, I think that helped me come out of myself a little bit. Initially football, played the school football team and wasn't a bad footballer. My uncle was a professional footballer.
Oh wow!
So that was in the family. And whenever you do anything quite well at school, I did pretty well academically, but when you're 9, 10, 11, you're starting to get a bit more confidence from certainly playing football for the school and then doing a few other things. And then I guess it was when I went to senior school that I did my first bit of cross country. I was never very good at short stuff. I didn't think I was a good runner. I was and when you're under 11, under 12, everything's just very short. So I didn't think I was that good.
Yeah.
And then I did a little bit of cross country. I realized I was a bit better at the longer stuff. Ran for the school in a few events, then joined the athletics club, and that was it really. Athletics then took over. I carried on playing football for a few years and did a bit of played a bit of basketball and other things. But yeah, athletics became, by the time I was 14, 15, I was going to the athletic club 3-4 times a week, training probably 5-6 times a week, and doing quite well at a national level. So that becomes what you want to do, isn't it? It's whenever you're quite successful at something. That maybe doesn't explain what sort of person I was, but the one thing I do know, I've always been incredibly competitive, and I still am.
Yeah. And so as you said, obviously you got into athletics really when you went into secondary school. But as like a child, like in primary school, what did you want to be?
I'm not sure I had any clear thoughts on that. Probably I was influenced by my dad was in the police force. So I used to, obviously you grow up in an environment where everybody you meet is a police officer. A bit wrapped up in that because my dad worked shifts, and I think certainly when I was very young, I probably thought, oh, I'd probably like to do that. You get very influenced by your parents, don't you?
Yeah.
However, as I said, I don't know. There was just all this nagging thing about wanting to be good at something. I just always very aware that was always in the back of my mind, and when I found that I was not a bad runner, and I'm as I said, beyond sprinting, I kind of became a little bit of a thorn in the side. For the athletics club had a great coach who inspired me a lot. He was great with young kids, but I became a little bit frustrated. I was about 14 and was doing well, and he kept saying to me, if you train, you'll do better. You'll be able to perform better.
Yeah.
And so I basically challenged him, because the athletic club only met on a Tuesday and a Thursday and a Sunday, and we raced maybe on a Saturday. So I was saying, well, if that's the case, why can't I come to the athletic club on a Monday and a Wednesday? Why can't it open? Why can't I train more? So I was always, I guess, a little bit challenging in that sense. I was always it was that combination of the competitive bit, but when I was always curious as to how good perhaps I could be at something.
Yeah. And obviously that like determination and that to be the best of yourself obviously helped you in your career. So as you said, your dad was a policeman. So what did your mum do, and how did that influence you?
My mother was German and was a huge influence. Like a lot of young German women, they came over here after the married British or American guys after in the 50s, after Germany lost the Second World War. A lot of them felt as though that perhaps that was the thing to do. But my mum was an incredibly strong character, so she was a big influence. And also, my German family have always been a massive part of our lives. So I started to travel very early when I was in the 60s, when I was 3-4 years of age, and my young brother, we used to go with my mum and dad on holiday to Germany, and then traveled around Europe often while we were there, which was very unusual for in the 60s. Certainly none of my school friends did anything like that. Most living in the northeast of England didn't travel further than about Whitley Bay, but yeah, so I think that it did have a big bearing on how I view the world. I think a much more of a wider view, if you like. My mum actually, obviously, German people in the 50s and the 60s were ridiculed a lot, because of religion. So my mum, there was a lot of what would now be called prejudice.
Okay, yeah.
So I learned to be very tolerant of people, of other people. You know, my mum would go crazy if ever I, you know, even thought about any derogatory term about anybody or anything, which wasn't usual. Again, you probably have done enough of this in learning about social history and everything. You know, in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of that sort of stuff was just the norm, if you like. But my mum was a massive influence on making sure that how I, you know, treat people and particularly people who weren't the same as me, if you like. And but also travel does that. You know, you broaden your experiences on everything, food, language. So that stood me in really good stead, because when I started as an athlete, it wasn't exactly new. You know, I'd done an awful lot of it as a youngster.
Yeah, so as you said, so obviously that helped you with competing internationally and things. So as you said, you started running in secondary school. But at what point did you and then you joined the athletics club? At what point did you start competing?
Well, I was competing right from the start, I guess. You know, that's how I joined the athletic club. So I was competing for my school. I didn't,
Oh, okay.
you know, you weren't just training. But the athletics club is where you start to put a bit more structure to it and start, you know, training 2-3 times a week and racing in higher level races than perhaps you do for your school. So, yeah, you know, and I did quite well right from the start. So that was a good way of, you know, keeping you involved. If you're successful at something, you tend to be a bit more interested in going back on a cold, wet November evening when top on TV, and you know, you'd rather sit in and watch TV when or your mates are. That's what your mates are doing when you're 30 or 40. You know, in the middle of the winter, you're going down to the athletic club to go and run a few miles. But I enjoyed it. You know, the athletic club was kind of like almost like a youth club, and you again, the world was very different then. So, you know, we had 3 channels on TV, and that was it. And so it was actually quite nice on an evening to go out and be part of something a bit different, and it was a good place to go. You know, boys and girls of the same age. In fact, the whole range of ages from, you know, 12 and then teenagers and older, and then all the senior members. So you're part of a very different community to that which you would have at school or at home. So, and I loved it. You know, we were racing. The better you got, you raced a bit further away, and you know, and then as an athletics club, we'd be going off to the Northern Championships or the national championships, cross country or the track, and so there was a lot of bus trips and just a lot of good fun. So I think I often ask myself the question. I don't really have an answer to it as to whether, had I not been as successful as I was, whether I still would have enjoyed it as much and carried on for as long. Because the vast majority of people who do it, that's what it is for them. They never get to go to the Olympics or, you know, run world records or anything. But so whether or not whether it was that was keeping me involved, or whether it was just the actual experience of it all was what I was enjoying. I think probably a mix of both.
Yeah. So once you started obviously competing in running, did you know it could be a job if you worked hard enough?
No, not then. Not to begin with. And it was still very much a sort of amateur sport, if you like. And you know, the ambition, even, you know, things moved fairly quickly for me as a teenager. But the biggest ambition you might have would be to represent your country. You know, you just kind of go up the levels. You start by, you want to represent your county at the English Schools Championship. Then it becomes, oh wow, you know, I'm going to the national championships. What if I managed to get in the national team? You know, there was a national team for England team for cross country and on the track as well. So and then gradually you're going through those different levels, and then, you know, one day it's like, wow, I'm going to represent my country at a major championships. You know, and as I said, things move very fast. You know, so I went to the Commonwealth Games when I was still in sixth form, or still doing my A levels. You know, I was still at school. But I was heading off to Canada at the Commonwealth Games, and my life sort of changed then. And I think it was at that point that you started to think, this is going to change the direction of travel for me, of what I was of how I thought my life was perhaps going to pan out. I didn't really. I mean, I don't know if all 17-year-olds know how their life's going to pan out, but it definitely became the number one focus because I was going on airplanes around the world. I was meeting people I'd watched on TV. I was running in, athletic meetings on TV. I had my name all over the newspapers locally, and I'd had some national coverage. So you go from, an athlete doing quite well in an athletic club to suddenly being recognised. Everyone in school knew who you were. You're doing, even at age 17, doing minor appearances and all that sort of thing. And it does change the way in which you see not only yourself, but what it is that you're trying to do. So it opened up a view of, hey, wouldn't it be great to do this for the next, and see how far I can go with this and see where it takes me. I don't think it was anything to do with, in fact, it definitely wasn't anything to do with money, because it wasn't really at that point. It was more about the wanting to be, I had heroes already then. I was watching people winning for Great Britain at the Olympics and things, and you kind of go, wow, wouldn't it be great? I wonder if I could do that. So that was really what was driving it. And it was only later that, I'll say this now, there aren't very many sports, and it's maybe why people don't get on in sport. You can't go into sport. Most sports require an awful lot of hard work, particularly athletics. It's it's an individual sport. You got to train for years and years and years and years, and you can't do all of that just on the faint hope that you might earn some money. You have to genuinely want to do it. You have to genuinely love it. Otherwise, you're just not going to do the work.
Yeah, and as you said about goals going from like county to nationally to internationally, but like when you hit that top of how far you can go with the Olympics and the World Championships, what did you see your goal then once you had hit that point?
Yeah, well, that's the challenge. You get to the top of the mountain, and there's only one way to go after that, theoretically. So you have to look for other mountains if you can. But if not, you try and stay there. And that is the hardest thing. The journey of getting to the top in anything is actually always the most enjoyable bit. Staying there is hard, particularly in a sport like athletics. I think. There are some sports where you can not be as good as you used to be and still be very at the top end. You're maybe playing golf, maybe tennis. You'll still have the odd good competition. You'll have the good, certain football. You can carry on playing if you've got a good team around you. You might not be the best player you used to be, but you just change your game a little bit. Athletics isn't really like that. It's a straight out physical test. Yeah, and people are always getting faster. It doesn't go backwards. It doesn't. I mean, the 1500 it can be tactical, and you can get around that. But if you're not in shape to be the fastest in the world or close to the fastest in the world, you're not going to be able to even use tactics to, the nuances of racing and everything. So the challenge is always about you and yourself, and to. Look, you can be in the best shape, and actually, you can keep improving and still not win. There are plenty of people who keep improving in their whole careers and never win a world title or an Olympic medal, just because of who else is around. So I think that it's an unusual sport in that you are constantly just measuring. You're against your competitors, but you're always measuring yourself against yourself. And because it's not a subjective sport, it's a very objective sport. You run 3:30 or you run 3:31. You high jump 2:35 or you high jump 2:33. You can't argue about it. You could argue, is Messi a better footballer than Ronaldo? Well, I don't know. Maybe some people are going to say Ronaldo, some people are going to say Messi. Yeah. If somebody runs quicker than somebody else, you cannot argue with that. That is it. So so that objectivity is something which you're always involved in. It's always there. There's a measure all the time of how fit you are, how good you are. Doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. And so when you get to the top, that's what you have to use to keep motivating yourself to do the training you need to do.
Yeah. And as you said, obviously the Commonwealth Games was your first big international tournament. So when you found out you were going to compete in that, like, how did you feel?
Shocked. It all came about overnight, really. I won't tell the story because it's way too long, but it is an interesting story. But I was running in a local Durham Schools Championships, and I was always going to win it, but I decided to go out and run really hard on my own. I ran what was then the equivalent of a 4-minute mile, which was, kind of international standard, on my own on a freezing cold Gateshead Stadium as a 17-year-old. Few people were watching, told, some local media and stuff. I got an invite to go and run at Crystal Palace the following week in a televised meet that was on the BBC. I broke the world record for the mile for a 17-year-old in that race. And while I was sitting after the race in the stand, kind of trying to soak all this in, because I'd gone from a schoolboy athlete one week to being on a televised in London. And one of the selectors, quite an influential guy, came up and said, "Would you like to go to the Commonwealth Games?" And I didn't even know when they were. I was kind of, when are they? I had a holiday planned with my mum and dad, the normal summer holiday. And he said, "Oh, it leaves it's 3 weeks time." And so yeah, I went from literally having a set of plans for the summer, which included going on holiday again with my parents to Germany for the second half of the summer. All that got, I say postponed, wasn't postponed, cancelled in return for me getting selected and going to the Commonwealth Games. And I learned so much, to be honest. The England selectors they sort of knew what they were doing, I guess, in the sense that I was definitely a borderline choice, but I was 17 and I learned so much in the 3 weeks I was there. I got knocked out. I didn't do very well. But even in the heats, I went to the front. I wasn't scared. I was kind of, but I learned so much about major championships. I hung around with lots of stars I'd seen on TV, talked to athletes and coaches and just absorbed, I was a bit like a sponge, just took in all of the experience that I could from that, which stood me in great stead right through the rest of my career.
Yeah, I can imagine. Imagine if you just said, "Oh, sorry, I've got my family holiday, so sorry, I can't do the Commonwealth."
Yeah, I know. There are people who've said over the years, there were 2 or 3 kind of, it's a sliding doors thing. Going back to that Durham Schools race the week before of the one that I got selected in, that was, I was actually annoyed and frustrated at one of the officials around something, which again I won't bore you with, but it was just me kind of being, okay, I'm going to go and show them, I had nobody to show. I was almost showing myself. I just wanted to make a point to somebody. And that then resulted in, and then I'm sitting there, get asked the question. And I could have said, "Oh, I'm not sure, I need to go home and ask her." But he sort of said he needed to know then because the selection meeting was that evening. So I said, "Yeah, of course I would, And a long, long, long time ago, somebody once told me, never say no to anything. Like, blag it, say, "Yeah, of course, have you ridden a horse before?" "Yeah, I've ridden a horse before." "Have you done this?" "Yeah." And then blag it until you at least get found out, So, so I didn't say no. I said yes, and that set me off, as I said, on a different path.
Yeah, I can imagine. So obviously, when you came back from the Commonwealth, you finished off your A levels. So did you go after you left school? Did you go straight into full-time athletics?
Yeah, well, again, without getting too detailed around it, I took a year out because I was where I was thought I was going to go. I didn't get one of the grades I was supposed to get, and I had 1 or 2 issues going on at home, not bad things, good things, and it actually ended up being the best move I could make, because in that year a completely different new course came up at what was then the fledgling Northumbria Uni, and it suited me much more, but it suited me more for my athletics. It was an athletics choice because I had a really good setup, which was kind of unusual for those days. I had a really good physio. I had a great my coach. I had a good training group. I had a great facility to train in. I had everything I sort of needed at home, and it might not have been the best choice to go away and kind of start and create something new in a different environment. That might not have happened, but what I do know is that it was the right choice at the time. So I had a year I did a little bit of work. I worked part-time in Gateshead Recreation Department, did a bit of this and a bit of that, in that year in between. And that was the only time I've ever had what I would call a 9-to-5 job. Even that wasn't for very long. But no, they were great because they gave me time to go away training. I went to Australia in the winter of that year for the first time. It was going to be Olympic year in 1980, and yeah, so all of that helped me get ready for by delaying things a year, but it wasn't so much delaying it a year. It was being able to have the same setup that I'd been creating up to that point, which was enabling me to do so well.
Yeah, so obviously, as you said about the Olympics, in 1980, you came second to Sebastian Coe, which meant you were chosen for the Olympics team for the 1980 Olympics. So how did you feel before that race? Were you very nervous at this, like, oh, can I get into the Olympics?
Yeah, that sounds as though it was very straightforward. It wasn't, and again, I mean, I'm trying to not make this is your life, but I'd actually fallen in the Olympic trials and thought that my chances of going had gone, because I was a young 19-year-old. Kono Vet were the big heroes that were going to hopefully win medals for Great Britain. I just was wishing I could get to the Olympics. But also we had Russia had invaded Afghanistan. So the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher wanted all the British team to boycott the games. Thankfully, the British Olympic Association decided that wasn't going to be the case. I got a second chance to make it into the team, and as I said, came second to Steve Ovett at a race in Oslo, which booked my place. But the Olympic experience for me, my first Olympics, wasn't the Olympic experience that everybody would imagine because of the constraints that had been placed on us by British Olympic Association and indeed the British government. So we weren't allowed to take part in the opening ceremony, for instance. So I had a really intense athletics Olympic experience, which is the most important thing. I just didn't get that wider Olympic experience that a lot of people would get. And actually that in some ways that again was a good thing, because it taught me that that's the important thing, is actually what the reason you're there. It's great and it's fun, and there's an awful lot of people that get to one Olympics in their whole lives and they enjoy all of that, and they're not going to win a medal. They are an Olympian, and they absorb all of the other great stuff that the Olympics is about, the whole multi-sport environment, and the opening ceremonies and the uniforms you get, and just the whole experience. Whereas people who win medals tend to be much more focused around what they do. And that was my first experience. And watching Kono Vet, I learned an awful lot for how they conducted themselves, particularly with the media and against each other. And so again, I got to the final, which was a big goal for me. So I athletically I did well. I got to the final. I was 19, but it was a very different Olympic experience because it was in Moscow, and there's lots been written about it in the days and years that have gone by, and documentaries made and all the rest of it. But it was an odd first Olympics.
Yeah, I can imagine. So were you happy with that result of the final? You placed 8th in the final as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, no, I was really happy. That was my goal, and everybody was watching the other two, and it was great to be part of that. And that was something which I used every single minute that I could out there to kind of learn as much as I could, and by going through the rounds, the heats, then the semi-final, then you're running the final. You're just getting a really good close-up view of what the guys who are trying to win are doing. Which I had no chance of winning or even winning a medal. But as I said, the result was more than I expect, or certainly as much as I'd hoped for. It was at the top end of my expectation.
Yeah, so obviously after that amazing first Olympics, you went on to have an incredible year in 1982, winning gold in not only the European Championships, but also the Commonwealth Games. So how was that year for you?
Yeah, it was a big year. That was my sort of step up year. I'd had quite good, I'd progressed quite well in 81, but in 81, Sepko and Steve Ovett were smashing world records all over the place and, moving the bar even higher than I thought it already was. But, they were important in doing that. They were showing that British athletes at the time could, because we hadn't had that much success for quite a long time before those two came along. And we had others they were a little bit older than me, but friends like Daley Thompson and who I'd grown up in the team with a little bit were doing well. And it was a great 82, and lots was changing in the sport as well. We were getting massive coverage. It was becoming much more commercial. You mentioned before about money. You became famous very quickly. It was on the newspapers a lot. Football wasn't the animal it is now. So, in fact, football was getting a lot of bad press. We had a lot of, hooliganism and everything in that period. And sort of certainly from a family perspective, athletics was an incredibly popular sport. Sellout stadia, lots of athletic meetings, athletics on the television all the time. And yeah, I was traveling the world competing, and 82 was the year I started winning really at the senior level, which was massive. And yeah, winning 2 gold medals in those championships was great. And that set me up kind of, for the next few years. But it's as I said, it's so hard to explain to people the sort of bubble we were in then, compared to kind of, athletics is still a popular sport now, but how the world consumes sport is very different. Whereas back then, as I said, again, going back to 3 channels, sometimes the meetings were on BBC and ITV at the same time. So you'd be getting, a year or 2 later, I was running races in Europe where both of them were televising the same race. There'd be 20-odd million people watching you run. Whoa. So when you flew back, everybody had seen you either in the pub or at home, and it was all over the newspapers. You couldn't do anything, go anywhere. And I'm not saying this is a negative. I'm just saying but it was a gradual process, and it probably really started in 82. That's when I started to become much more well known and much more. My life sort of was changing, not just on the track, but off the track as well.
So it was a big mainstream sport then, it sounds like. So how much did you get recognized, as you said? Everywhere. Just
and that's why I still do now for people of a certain age. If they grow up watching it, or if they're of my age, I still do, and because people absorb things differently then, and as I said, it was now there's so much content. It's really hard for people to keep abreast of everything that's out there. Yeah. Imagine it's much more condensed and there's only certain things that everybody sees.
Yeah.
Then there's a shared knowledge of that, and people knew who people were. And so yeah, from 1982 onwards, it was certainly locally, nationally, it depends on where you were and all the rest of it. But yeah, Sebco and Steve Ovett were probably the 2 most famous sports people in the UK. And then the rest of us kind of, followed, but I was quickly following on behind. The footballers weren't as well known. Certainly not as well known as perhaps the athletes. So as I said, the likes of Daley Thompson or Tessa Sanderson or myself, or we were of a and also it had a wide appeal. Athletics has always had a wide appeal because it's men and women. It's I suppose like football to some extent. It's people from very ordinary backgrounds. It's not
Yeah.
kind of not tennis, it's not golf, with all due respect to them, or rowing, or
Yeah.
people come from the back streets of Jarrow, where I came from, South Tyneside. They, or you can come from inner city London, or it really there are no barriers to entry into athletics, so it always has had that wider appeal, and also it's very straightforward. Most people have done a bit of running, or
Running,
certainly
yeah.
maybe not these days, but those days everybody had done athletics at school, so they'd done something.
You don't have to know like complex rules. It's literally just running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or even doing the long jump or the high jump. It's fairly straightforward. So
Yeah, so it sounds like it's completely like turned around, because obviously like footballers are now in big fame, and football was like what I would call like the main sport of the UK. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's flipped, because if you ask me to name like athletes and runners, British runners, currently, I might struggle. But obviously you were in the golden era of UK British athletics. So obviously after 82, you went on to win the World Championships in 1983. After all of that success, how did you feel going into the 1984 Olympics? Did you feel more nervous than the 1980 ones because people had an expectation of you?
I don't think I was nervous, because I nearly didn't go. I was just pleased to actually be there in the end. I mean, anybody's sport and career is a lot of it's about timing as well, And I remember I said to you before, so when are you running well? And the Olympics comes around every 4 years, and I would have loved the Olympics to have been in 1983 or 1985 or 1986, or but they weren't. They were in 1984, and I got a really bad injury, which was an accident. I stood on a Coke can, oddly enough,
Okay.
running one night, just litter, and I really badly twisted my ankle.
Oh dear.
And had sort of 10, 12 weeks out, which isn't right, which isn't
no.
good preparation. And had I not been pre-selected for the Olympics, and we don't have pre-selection anymore, but for a period we did then, as you mentioned, I'd won the World Championships the year before. So I'd been pre-selected for the Olympics. Had I not been pre-selected, I probably wouldn't. I certainly wasn't fit enough to take part in the trials. And I only really got training about 5-6 weeks before the Olympics. Did about 4 weeks of training before flying out to the US, and really it was touch and go as to whether I was actually going to compete, because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do myself justice. It's the Olympics after all, and I was still up against the same guys, Seb Coe and Steve Ovett and others by then. So when I look back on it, it was an incredibly traumatic 3-4 months. And I would have loved to have been going into those Olympics confident, and in the way I was in 83, and I was the next couple of years running as well as that. But I wasn't. But I think deep down, I'm always really proud of what I did do. I didn't win. I did everything. I tried everything to do it, and I got beat by Seb Coe, the all-time greats, and I won the Olympic silver medal. And had I, again, remember going back to that young kid being asked, "Do you want to go to the Commonwealth Games?" Where you go, I could have very easily decided not to go to those games in LA, thinking, I'm really not fit enough to go there and do myself justice. I'm not going to. I might struggle even to get out of the heats. But I've always been that. I wonder if, a what if, and I ran. I couldn't have run another half a step quicker. I gave everything I had. Actually, the race was much quicker, the final, than I'd anticipated. I was hoping it was going to be a slow tactical affair. It would have given me more of a chance. But it wasn't. It was flat out from the start. It was an Olympic record. It wasn't far off the world record. It was really hard. And Seb ran a great race, and I'm still to this day pretty proud that I managed to come second, given everything that had been happening in the weeks leading up to it. And 4 weeks later I was flying, but the Olympics are when they are. That's it. It's a bit like great players who you look at Lionel Messi. I mean, it worked out for him this time, but he'd had 3 World Cups where either he wasn't playing well or his team wasn't doing well, or So it's all about when it comes around. How
timing.
So 4 years is a long time. Some people can have a whole. Most people don't stay at the top for very long in most sports. You might have 3 or 4 years if you're lucky, where you're at the peak. You can be thereabouts in terms of being the number one. You might have a year or 2 years. In golf, they get 4 majors every year. In tennis, they get 4 Grand Slams every year. You can have a go at winning Wimbledon every single year. We don't get the chance to do the Olympics every year. And back then, the World Championships, which we knew, were only every 4 years as well. So you've got to, you have to be pragmatic about that. You can't let it chew you up. And I was frustrated as hell, but still pretty proud.
So do you think if it wasn't for that injury, do you think you could have performed better there?
I would have
got that gold.
I would have definitely performed better. No idea if I would have won. Who knows? Seb was a great competitor, but it would have. It would have been. It was a great race anyway, but it would have. I would have been much better equipped to kind of run the race I wanted to race. That's kind of what I wasn't able to do. I was almost following rather than trying to make things happen. So, but yeah, look, I don't look back on that with anything other than pride in what happened. And the next Olympics, same thing. I got injured again. That was more towards the back end of my career. That's probably the one I tend to try and not look at. That's the one where I kind of feel that was a much more of a missed opportunity on my behalf. Not more about how I got injured just before the games in '88. It was my fault. I had a decision. I could have prepared for the games in a slightly different way, and I got injured just before the games again. But in LA it was different. In '84 it was definitely more of an accident, and definitely. Anyway, but yeah, so interspersed in all of that, you still have all of the other successes, and being an Olympic silver medalist is still something I'm really proud of.
Yeah. If you're enjoying the interview so far, please do subscribe. We are trying to get to 200 subscribers. We're only about 20 away now, which is not that far, so please do subscribe. Yes, you can expect to see more interesting interviews with more interesting people every 2 weeks on Sunday at 1 o'clock. So now it's time to get back to the interview. And obviously, you keep on repeating Steve over and Sebastian Coe, because you were all dominating. Like at that time, British were dominating the middle distance running. So what was that rivalry like between all of you British athletes?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they grew up more together, so they were of a similar age, but they were 4 or 5 years older than me. So when I first came in the team, they were like 4 or 5 years is a lot when you're 17, 18. They were already experienced and doing well. But as I got better, yes, I became a rival to them, but not with the intensity that they'd had for each other.
Yeah,
I'd always seen myself as kind of the one in the middle, and they were both very different characters, and I'm different to the two of them as well. I did learn a lot from them, and I got to know them both pretty well, and kind of changed how I interacted with them over the years, as you do with anybody. But they were obviously a massive influence to begin with. Then they became massive rivals, and then they became good friends. So we had a period there where it was really, really hard just to get on the British team. That at 1500 or 800, and there wasn't just us three. Behind us, there were 3 or 4 other top world class. People like Peter Elliott, who won world medals, Olympic medals, didn't break any world records or anything. But we had 5 or 6. Certainly the 4. If you threw Peter in the mix, and then a few others who popped up and out down at 8 and 1500. and it's partly because that's what success does. Success breeds success in the sense that, when I'm 15, 16 and I'm watching those guys doing their thing on TV, I'm going, ooh, I could do that. Whereas if they were Russian, or if they were Kenyan, or if they were, I might not have had the same belief.
Okay,
so having somebody doing it who you kind of think, I'm like them, I can do that, was really important. So, and then others were following on behind us as well.
Yeah. So, like, were you friends at the peak of your rivalry? Were you friends during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, were you friends? Did we go out for dinner? No. I'm in the northeast. Seb was initially Sheffield, but lived sort of London area. Steve was Brighton. I only ever saw them when we were competing. Occasionally, in my early days, I had a couple of training trips to Australia with Ovette, and got to know him a bit more those days. I wouldn't say in those days I really knew Seb very well. You hang around with your people you compete with. Look, if you go to school, right?
Yeah.
And you're in a class, there are going to be people. It's like being on an athletics team, about the same amount of people, and probably twice as many, maybe 70 people on an athletics team. There are going to be 2 or 3 really good friends, people you hung around with. Maybe you've known them since your junior days and you've come through together. There's going to be another few who you're pretty close to. There's going to be a whole bunch who, you're on nodding terms with, whatever. And then there's going to be a handful who you really don't like. Okay. And you sort of avoid. And that's no different. That's what people are like. It's just that when the people are in your event, you have to be able to have an arm's length relationship, because they're after the same thing you are. So you don't have to hate them. You don't have to be best friends, but a mutual respect. And I think all that happened with me was with those two, is I had to change from being the pupil to being their equal. And that was, I think, easier for me to deal with than it perhaps was for them. Because you can imagine, initially, they were both really helpful and lots of advice when I was away on trips. And then that stopped. And so it should, because all of a sudden I was a rival. I wasn't just the young kid kind of, trying to chase them down, and they were happy to share thoughts and ideas. And then you become rivals. So then you can't really have conversations about training, or anything. You start talking about football or politics or whatever else. But no, I've always gotten really well with the pair of them. Probably more so with Seb in the latter years than when I was actually running. And I don't see Steve very much because he emigrated to Australia. So I see Seb a lot more, in the last 20 years.
Yeah. So obviously, after all 3 of your careers were over, did that friendship build a bit more?
Yeah, as I said, I think literally the year that I retired, I think Steve emigrated to Australia. So again, I didn't see so much of him. Seb in particular, who I never thought I got to know particularly well while we were competing. I then got to know him much better afterwards. And our paths have kind of crossed in all sorts of ways over the years. And obviously now he's president of the federation. So, I've had so I see a lot more of him on a regular basis through the year. So, and it's nice though. I've got other people I used to compete against as well, who would be less well known, who are still in contact with. Some who work like me in the media in their country, who I see on the circuit now and then. So there's actually quite some people that I used to compete with or were in teams with other people are on the circuit these days as managers or agents or coaches. So it's quite nice. I still see a fair few people who I used to either compete against or certainly were on the circuit with back then.
Yeah. So at your prime, what events did you compete in? Obviously, was your main the 1500 meter race?
Yeah, middle distances, 1500 and 800. 1500 was my my best event. I loved the 800 because certainly initially nobody expected me to do anything at 800, and I wasn't quick to begin with. I was much more of an endurance-based athlete. And in fact, after those first in 1980, I thought I might move up to the 5,000, which I never did. I got much better in 1,500. But the nice thing in the middle distances is we can run some odd distances sometimes. But it's either the 1,500 or the mile. So the metric version of the mile, it's 1,500. But in the US and in a lot of meets around Europe, we still run the mile. And the mile is still a recognized world record. And occasionally we can run odd distances like 1,000 meters or 2,000 meters as well. So you get to be able to mix it up a lot more than perhaps a sprinter who runs either the 100 or the 200, and that's it.
Yeah, so obviously you mentioned the mile there. So in Oslo in 1985, you broke the world record for the mile at 3 minutes 46. I think that was right. I don't know. Got it off Wikipedia. Hopefully it's right. So like, how did that feel when you broke the world record?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're in a period in your career there when you're running well, and there were no championships that year, so I was just trying to see how fast I could run, really. And the mile has been part and parcel of British history because of Sir Roger Bannister and being the first athlete to break the 4-minute mile. And he was voted by the British public the most famous sportsman of the 20th century, or the most iconic sportsman of the 20th century. So I grew up with hearing about him, meeting him, and then all the people who held the world record after him, one other Brit, and then other people who were legends to me. My coach used to talk about and give me books to read about them when I was 15, 16, 17. They're almost like comic book heroes, so breaking the world record for the mile was kind of a rites of passage almost. The Olympics and the world champs and all the rest of it, but trying to break the world, and Kono Vet had both done it ahead of me as well. And so yeah, it was pretty special. And I did it in Oslo on my favorite tracks. My family from Germany were there to watch me, which wasn't very usual. They'd come over for that. And it was one of those nights where I think I probably could have run a fair bit faster. I just kind of was so wrapped up in the whole thing. I didn't really go out flat out hard from only when I got to the bell. And even then, I was just running so strong and powerfully. It was just one of those nights. But yeah, and I mean, I think thankfully I've waited an awful long time, but we've finally got some British runners who look capable, perhaps, of breaking it, because it's still a British mile record, and it shouldn't be after all these years. But I think what was nice about it wasn't so much the achievement on the day, as good as that was. As the years went by, I think that record stood as a world record for 9 or 10 years, and it's been got broken by Hisham El Garouj, and that's still the world record. So as a celebration of the 4-minute mile, which was set in 54, we've had various, over the years, dinners and anniversaries and things where that group of people from around the world came together, from New Zealand, from America, from Tanzania, from France, from the UK, and that group of people who broke the world record, it was like an exclusive club to be in, and it was incredibly nice to be part of that. And sadly, Sir Roger died a few years ago, and actually one of the other guys has now died as well. So it's a dwindling club now, but every now and then we do get together. World Athletics got a few of us together just before COVID, and everyone's getting a bit older, but we still have lots of good memories. But it's a lovely club to be part of. It's a great bunch of guys.
Yeah, so obviously you're still now the 4th quickest man to ever run a mile, and you say it's British. Is it right that it's a European record for the mile as well? Or
yeah, it still is. You're right, because Jakob is the Olympic champion and an incredible talent. He had a go at breaking it in Oslo this year in front of his home crowd, and I thought he was going to do it, and he just missed out by couple of tenths. Yeah, so it is still. He did tell me he was going to break it that night, because he's quite a confident young man. And at the top of the home straight, I was commentating the race as well. I thought he was going to do it.
That must have been like
Yeah, I know. And he was he just fell away the last sort of 30, 40 meters. He just got a bit tired. But yeah, it's nice to know that all these years later, whatever it is, 40 years later, almost 38 years or whatever, it's still hard.
Yeah, so like, how does it feel to think that you're like the fourth quickest man in the world to run a mile?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, all those things are they're a measure of what you are, and that's all they are. You know, everything moves on, and everything. You know, we had better tracks than when Roger Bannister were around. We had better training techniques. They've got even better training techniques now. They've got much more science and medical help. They've got great shoes that we didn't have. You know, but you can't. You just got to be pleased with what you did and how it stands up. You know, I think the way I try to, because obviously I commentate and I'm involved in, you know, look at all the guys who are doing the stuff now, and every now and then I kind of, you know, we have these conversations in the bar afterwards, and people kind of go, "Oh, do you think you could beat him?" And there's nobody right now in all the years I've been running, commentating. There's nobody I wouldn't have been frightened to race. Let's put it that way. I would have. There are a lot of people I would have loved to have been able to race against them over the years, and particularly right now, Ingebrigtsen from Norway. He was very similar to how I used to race, so I'd love to have a go at racing him. Sadly, that will never happen. But
yeah, and also along with the mile, in a 19-day period, you broke the 1500 and the 200 and the 2000 meter record, world record. Like, how was that period like?
Yeah, as I said, it was just a season where I was trying to run fast as I could across all the distances and improve all my personal best, which I did. I mean, I didn't break the world record in the 800 because but I ran, I think at the time it was the 4th or 5th fastest ever 800, but it was a big personal best for me. I missed the world record for 1,000 meters on a very cold, windy night in Gateshead, where the wind rather than anything else. And I ran the second quickest time ever at the 1,000. Seb had the world record. I just missed it by a couple of strides. And then I had the other three. So it certainly was nearly 4. It was never going to be 5. I would never have broken the 800 world record. But all you're trying to do, I mentioned it before, you know, when you're in great shape, and I didn't have to peak for championships or anything. It was just go out and enjoy my racing. And you know, I actually loved racing more than what I would call time trialing. So these races, there's a pacemaker and you're going out to run as hard as you can. I actually genuinely my whole career preferred racing championships, and because then you're pitting your wits and tactics. Because the 100 meters, the gun goes, you've got to run as fast as you can. That's it. There's no, you know, you're trying to execute the race the way which you want to, but that's it. Whereas in the 1500, we can sometimes jog for a lap. We can, you know, somebody can try and take the lead early. You can wait until the last kick or the last 200 meters. You can, you know, there are lots of different ways in which the 1500 is run. And that was what always attracted me to the event, I think, from a young age. And that's what I loved. So those world records were very different to that. They were just, you know, go out and see how fast you can run.
Yeah, so obviously that's one of your so many amazing moments of your career, from being world champion to breaking the 3 world records in 19 days, to being the first man on the planet to run a 1500 meter under 3 minutes and 30, and so more. But what is the moment you're most proud of?
You know, that it's really hard to rank things. I think the race, if I had to kind of say to people, that's what epitomized me as a 1500 meter runner, and therefore, you know, was the World Championships in 1983, because it was obviously it was actually the first ever World Championships we'd had for athletics. It was massive at the time because we'd had boycotts in both of the Olympics. This was the first global event that everybody was there. There were no boycotts or anything. But it was also a classic 1500 meter tactical race. And I I'd done my homework. I'd got given a little bit of information, you know, which happens at a champ anyway. People tell you, oh, he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And, you know, you've got to take all that with you out onto the track. and then you've got to make a lot of decisions. You've got in 3.5 minutes. You've got to just be processing information about what the other guys are doing, how you feel, what you're doing, how you're going to try and win it. And responding and reacting, so it's a very intense 3.5 minutes thereabouts.
I can imagine.
And that 1500-meter final was a great example of, I think, how I used to like racing 1500 meters, and I won by doing it. So I think for that reason, I would hold it out there.
Yeah, I can imagine them races just being so intense and nerve-wracking. I can't imagine what
we jogged for a lap, literally, and of course when you jog for a lap, everyone just gets incredibly nervous. Like, okay, who's going to break, who's going to go, and you're all very close together as well. There's chance of tripping up, and so yeah, it's. But those races were always intriguing, in the sense of who's gonna blink first, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, so good fun.
Yeah. So if you could just run one more race out of your career, what would it be?
I think in that sense that I'd go back to that mile race in Oslo, but for the very reason that I was at the peak of my powers in terms of how fit I was, and it was in my favorite stadium in Oslo, and so if I could go and run it again, I wouldn't do a lot different. I'd just run a little bit quicker. Yeah, no, if the feeling, in sport, people often say, like, if you're watching Roger Federer, or someone like Ben Stokes playing cricket or whatever, they can make what should be quite difficult for even the top people, they can make it look so darned easy. Tiger Woods at his best, and occasionally, as an athlete, you get into a period of your career, or maybe a week, or maybe just one night, where it just doesn't feel hard, where it just happens, and that was one of those nights.
Yeah. And what was the lowest point of your career? Was it that Olympics?
1988 Olympics, yeah. Finishing fourth, when, for all sorts of reasons, a whole myriad of reasons why I finished fourth. Yeah, which again, I'm not gonna delve into everything here now, but there's a whole host of things. But that definitely was a low point.
Yeah. So obviously so when did you retire again?
The sort of 94, winter of 94, 95, I just woke up one day and was like, I'd had so many injuries over the previous 3-4 years, and I probably could have kept on. In fact, I definitely could have kept on. But I think when you've been at the very top, there's nothing wrong with coming second when you used to come first, or third when you used to come second, and all the rest of it. That's not an issue. And I was prepared.
Yeah.
What I'd lost though was I was struggling to get motivated enough to do particularly come back from injuries. There's a lot of rehab, and I don't know. I'd lost. If you wake up on the morning of a race and you're not nervous, that's not good. And I was kind of at that point in my career, and was just. You mentioned it earlier on. It almost become a job, and it really shouldn't be. You've got to really love what you're doing, and so I just woke up one day and was like, nah, that's it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't do any big announcement or anything. It was quite a while before kind of I sort of let people know that I wasn't going back into training, and but yeah. And then later that summer, 95, I did my first commentary. That was opened up a whole set of new doors, and yeah, that was it. So I think the hardest part with any when a sport or anything's been so much part of your life since you were 11, 12, and you're 34, so for 20 odd years, it wasn't I knew I wasn't going to miss the injuries, and and I'd had a great career. I'd had loads of successes. I couldn't argue about that. But I actually did love the people, the traveling, the big championships, big nights in Oslo and Zurich and Brussels, and that had been part of my life for as long as I can remember. And one of the reasons why I fell into commentary was it was certainly not a plan, but I knew it was a way to keep that bit of the sport.
Yeah, continue that. Yeah.
I had no idea whether I'd be any good at it, and there were probably other things I could have done within it, but it actually, and I've always said this, it's a good second best. It's nowhere near as good as being out there on the track, but to be sitting in the stands, watching everything, commentating on it, it's a bloody good second best.
Yeah, because that reminds me, because I've interviewed Gabby Logan before, and obviously she had a very small gymnastics career and she got injured, but she said that was the second best to still be a part of that world and present instead. That was the second best to actually competing.
Yeah, it is, and it's, I mean, you could officiate, I think the thing about commentating is you're very close to the event. You kind of, you're immersed in it. You're almost part of it, certainly for the viewer at home.
Yeah.
So you get that excitement. I get nervous for big races. I'm really intrigued to see, can he beat that? Okay, in my head sometimes I can't get the words out because I'm thinking about, oh, why doesn't he do this? And she should make a move now. And and so I love all of that. And as a commentator, and I do coach as well. But the coaching thing, you're not always there. You're not necessarily at every race. You're certainly not necessarily at every training session. Whereas from a commentary, commentating on the big events is still something that it's much longer than I care to think of, but it's still something I really enjoy.
To end off the interview, what advice would you give to anyone wanting to become a runner?
Well, everybody can run, first of all. And the great thing is there are lots of events. So not everyone's going to be a distance runner. Not everyone's going to be a marathon runner. You may be a sprinter. The trouble is these days people don't really get the chance to find out what they're good at. We're all born with various physical attributes. So I'd say if you can, certainly for young people, is to try and find local athletics club, go along and just try a few different things, because you never know. Whoever goes around jumping hurdles, there's the 800 meters is an event which straddles both the 400 and 1500, but you can come to it from different directions. Some people end up at 5,000, 10,000 meter runners. So there's lots of different things. So I think initially it would be, have a go at a few things, find out what you enjoy the most. And look, the thing, particularly for young people, is stick at it. If you do find yourself into a training regime, and it takes a long time to develop any talent that might be there, and even the people with less talent, a lot of hard work can get you an awful long way. It's just that an awful lot of people don't want to do the hard work. It's a great sport for the reward of what you put in. You only have to see all the millions of people who run marathons and 10Ks and half marathons who've done no running for years and years and years, and then they can put 6 months training in and run a marathon. So the reward you get for the training is great. There's not many people could pick up a golf club and at the age 45 and 6 months later be doing quite well. It doesn't really work like that. So whereas running, because we're all natural at it, we don't have to learn too much around technique, but we can, if we're prepared to do a bit of training, then it can give you great results. And
what advice, because I would just say casually run at the gym, and I run on a morning. And so what advice would you give to someone like me who doesn't want to compete in it, but is just like a casual runner?
Well, I think the thing for, how old are you?
14.
Right, 14. Okay, the great thing about running is if you keep doing it, when you get to my age, you will thank your 14-year-old self immensely, because it's a very straightforward exercise that the body adapts to very easily.
Yeah.
We were actually designed to do it, but it's brilliant for your health, both mental health and physical health. And you can do it wherever you are, anywhere in the world, any time of the day. Put a pair of running shoes on, whether it's in the gym or whether it's outside, and it will stand you in such good stead. So you don't have to, you're right, not everyone's going to be an Olympian or anything else. But running for me it's been a massive part of my life, but it's given me lots of other things, I think health benefits as well, that and I said I'm going out the door for a run shortly. I only run every other day, but it's just enough to keep me fit and healthy and keep my mind straight and all the rest of it. So if you can carry on doing it, because the vast majority of people, particularly kids, go to any playground under 10s, they'll be running around and you can't stop them. All right.
Yeah.
Then you get to 12, 13, 14, and you get a bit cool and you get a bit, and then by the time you're 16, 17, you're not doing anything. And then when you get to 25 or 28 or 32, you go, oh my God, what happened? And you start again. So what I'd say is don't stop. Just keep it as part of your life, part of your regime. It doesn't have to be every day, just as regularly as possible, because you will thank yourself so much in years to come.
Yeah, so as you say, you do it every other day. So how long do you do? Do you do like 5K or?
No, that's a bit short.
Bit short.
Days I'll do at least 10K.
Wow, at least.
Yeah, when the nights are a little bit late and I have more time. I did a 25K run between Christmas and New Year just to keep my hand in with the longer stuff. But I'll do anything between sort of, I mean, if I'm really pushed for time, 8K might be just because I'm pushed for time. But generally, I'll try and run 10, 12K.
Wow, so you did 25K between Christmas and New Year. When most people don't know what day it is and just feel like it's a Sunday every day.
Well, I don't live too far. I'm very lucky to live in Northumberland and don't live too far from Kielder Forest. And it was very nice to go up there one day and just get away from all the hustle and bustle. And I was pretty cold and a bit wet, but run on the trails in the forest. And it was, and that's remember what I said to you, why you should keep doing it when you're 14 is that's quite a joyful thing to do, And you know what? I do it around the world. I find I've traveled a lot and it can be really stressful. But the great thing is, I've found out so much about cities and parks and things just by putting my running shoes on and going out. And I don't wear any pods or headphones, anything like that, and just absorb. And it's great thinking time or just taking in the scenery or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I feel like that when I get myself to go out for a run. So thank you, Steve, for coming on today. It's been a real interesting. I've learned a lot about you by researching. I remember when I was researching you a couple of months ago when we were supposed to be doing this interview, I went down to my parents. I was like, what? He's like the 4th quickest man to do a mile. I was so amazed about reading your story and getting the chance to interview you because I had no idea when we met you.
Yeah, no, should you? No, it's very nice, and thank you very much, and good luck with all that you're doing, and don't forget to keep running. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good work run.
Will do. Take care.
So hopefully you enjoyed my interview with the incredible Steve Cram. I do want to say a big thank you to Steve for letting me interview him and allowing me to take up so much of his time, and to his partner who helped me organise this and get it scheduled in. If you do want to check out more of Steve Cram, the links to all of his socials are in the description down below. That's all we have time for this episode. We will be back on the 29th of January at 1 o'clock with another great interview. Please share this video with your friends and family. Like, comment, listen to last week's episode if you haven't already. Listen to this show until the end. Email me and follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe because we are trying to get to 200 subscribers. In the meantime, if you have any suggestions to make the show better, or if you want the chance to come on the show, comment below, message me on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, or email me at thebrickheadshow@gmail.com. So that is worth time for this week. We will be back on the 29th of January at the same time. But for now, goodbye!
Bringing you a kid-friendly radio show. Every Saturday afternoon on YouTube. Broadcasting live at 1 o'clock.